Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Certificate Course in Dialogue Studies, Week 8. And we have with us today Basit Bhai, and the topic he's going to speak on is the concept of friendship and enmity in Islam. Basit Bhai is an Islamic scholar and a social activist. He's also an Ashoka Fellow since 2017. In 2017, he founded the Brotherhood of Humanity, a social action group dedicated to engaging in processes through which perceived enemies become friends. Basit Bhai has been taking sessions with the different cohorts and the previous cohorts as well. And I'm very happy to have you here, Basit Bhai, for our participants. I would like to also mention that it is Basit Bhai who taught me the tenets of Islam. He is my spiritual guru, and I have learned a lot from him. And so we welcome you, Basit Bhai, and I'm sure our students are very excited to hear from you. So I hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pragya. You are always kind with words. And thank you, Basit Bhai and In Dialogue Foundation for inviting me again and again for this Dialogue Studies program every year. And I really enjoy, taking these sessions with your students. So I did share a booklet. Was it shared, Pragya? The booklet for reading?
Yes, it was shared. Yes.
Okay. So, failed to start, please try. 1 second. My screen sharing failed to start. 1 second. So let's begin the session. I hope it works. 1 second. 1 second. The presentation quit. 1 second. Sorry. So today we'll be discussing about the concept of friendship and enmity in Islam. And you might have gone through the booklet which was shared. So how do we fit dialogue in context of friendship and enmity in Islam? Or, dialogue is something which, if there are two people, and there's a conflict and it needs to be resolved, the dialogue has to happen. And the history of Islam, the Prophet ﷺ, in his life, he also saw many conflicts. And he was able to turn his enemies into friends. So in this presentation, we'll be looking at his life and something also about me. So we'll discuss dialogue in context of your presenter, which is me. I'll introduce you to some ideas about how I came to this work. Then we'll also be discussing God in Islam, how we view in Islam who sows enmity, who's behind creating enmity, who is a faithful and what is the faithful's role. We'll also look into the question, are non-Muslims enemies? And if there are enemies, then what about them? And a conclusion. So Michael Crichton, he said, if you don't know history, then you don't know anything. So about me. I was giving a talk, series of talks in Nainital, and this picture is from there. So I am born and brought up in Delhi, and I got a very good education. I studied from DPS, Arkipuram, and my father was a government servant. And I think I had a very, upbringing, a childhood, about which I'm happy that I had such a childhood. And of course, everybody sees some ups and downs, some problems in the family, but overall, I'm grateful. Finding being grateful is an attitude. I'm grateful. So after my schooling years, I was into a lot of sports. So I had played football up till national levels in that age group, and I was in several sports. There was a time I really wanted to be a sports person, an athlete, and in college when I came, I did bachelor's in social work from Jamia Millia Islamia. 3 years of bachelor's. Now they've discontinued this course since 2017, I think, or 14. And then I did my development communication from Mass Communication Research Center, again from Jamia. And some smaller courses here and there. And during my graduation years, my interest in religion grew, and I met several religious scholars, let's say, several different, even from different backgrounds, from different sectarian thoughts. And one particular scholar who had impact on me was Maulana Wahiduddin Khan. And he's not the only one, but he's one of those who had a good impact on me. And I used to have a lot of debates with him. I used to argue. I didn't used to accept what he used to say. And he told me the way I should take. So he told me, he gave me a syllabus. This is how you should study. He said, don't believe me. Don't accept what I'm saying. But look into the scriptures. Look into the scriptures. Up till that time, I myself was becoming a bit moving towards hatred and division. But with him, he would contradict those ideas, and I would debate with him. And he said then that in the end that, okay, you read the scriptures yourself. And he charted out a syllabus for me that read the Quran, read the Seerah, read these Hadith books. And when I did, and he said, okay, judge yourself. Don't believe me or don't believe anyone else. Just see what is really there. And I started to do that. And that's when my, understanding that Islam calls towards love and harmony and peace, and not towards conflict, not towards hatred, that those ideas got formed. So the ideas that I have, it's not that somebody fed me those ideas. They were the ideas that, really cooked into me as I went into the scriptures. So so this journey began, of helping other young people go through a similar journey, that they should read, they should, see for themselves what really there is. Because generally people, what they do is, anybody comes and tells you, this is what Islam says, this is what the Quran says, and people just accept it. But why don't you read yourself? Why don't you study? Why don't you think yourself? So I started to, work with my friends and other young people. And that work kept growing. And my command or my hold on the scriptures and Islamic studies, it kept becoming stronger and stronger over a period of time. And it's a never-ending journey. So besides that, since I did my studied from Mass Communication Research Center, I was also working a bit in media, making documentaries, corporate films. That was my bread and butter. And this working with the scriptures and, working on religion was my passion. So during my study, why I do what I do? How did this journey begin? Actually, like I told you, I came across several different religious scholars who had really very diametrically opposite ideologies or understanding of Islam. So I came across some, religious scholars who were a bit on the radical side, a bit more on the extremist side, which I say now. Of course, I wouldn't have said that at that time. And during my own study, I realized that those particular scholars were more sincere or more following more of their political vision rather than what the scriptures really said. So what I found was that they had a particular political vision, and they were making the scriptures bent, and they were bending the scriptures to meet their worldview. Hmm? Uh, so that was a point where I felt really heartbroken at one particular time, because those were some scholars whom I really admired, whom I really followed. I would say I was a fan of those scholars. But in my studies, I found that they were hiding things, they were not telling things, and they were cherry picking. So that really kind of broke my heart, and that's where my journey of helping other young people to see for themselves started. That if I'm being betrayed, there are other people who are being betrayed. Other young people like me are being betrayed, and I must help them to realize or see what they are really into. So this was about me in brief. Who studies religion? Uh, People who say that they are faithful people, they study. So in any religious community, there are politically minded people, and they are also hypocrites, that they cherry pick, they don't show things properly, and they are the ones who shout the most, scream the most, calling other people hypocrites or unfaithful to their community. So there's one such group, and there are really people of faith. Then dialogue practitioners like you, as well as those who want to kill the dialogue and set a monologue, who want to silence other opinions or understandings. So they also read religion. They try to build narratives and find support in religion, because religion is powerful. Religion has a very powerful force. The idea of God, an afterlife. Many times I tell my students that religion is like a knife. You can cut vegetables, or you can kill people. Religion is like fire. You can cook food, or you can burn down things. So, but it is powerful. It is really powerful. Also, peace builders study, and those who want to create conflicts. So we have people on both sides. Religion is something you can't ignore. And both the sides try to study it. So the main question that comes out, especially in the context of this class, is that every faithful person, every person of any religion must think, is religion supposed to teach us love, or is religion supposed to teach us hate? I think if anybody ponders on this question deeply and sincerely, will come to realize that what would be the core idea, what would religion really be standing for. And I don't think anybody, even the most extremist person, will not say that religion stands for enmity. Even though they'll do all kinds of gymnastics after that, they'll do all sorts of gymnastics and acrobatics to prove that. But no, we need to hate, and we need to have enemies. We don't want enmity; they want enmity. That's how they finally come to their own vision. So the idea of God in Islam. So on the right corner, can you see my cursor, my mouse? This sentence written on Bismillah in Arabic, which is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This defines who God is in Islam, the idea of God in Islam. And every chapter of the Quran except one begins with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So we'll have a bit more discussion about this later. It means, God is someone who's intensely and continuously loving, caring, merciful. I'll talk more about it later. So the idea of God in Islam is not some is not a God who's, of one community or one group of people. He's God of everyone. For example, this verse from the Quran, chapter 22, verse 40, it says, monasteries, churches, synagogues, and mosques, in which the name of Allah is much mentioned. So it talks about that the name of Allah is much mentioned in different places of worship. Now, if you go to a church, you don't hear Allah. If you go to a synagogue, you don't hear the word Allah. If you go to a monastery, you don't hear the word Allah. What does the word Allah really mean? And yet Quran claims, the name of Allah is much mentioned in all these places and more. Allah actually literally means, it comes from Al and Ilah. Al means the and Ilah means God, Allah. So it has come to become a proper name now for God, but it comes from two words, Al and Ilah, which means the God. And the idea of the God in Islam is that whenever somebody is talking about the creator of the universe, one creator of the universe, they're really talking about Allah. Maybe not using the same word. Of course, in monasteries, churches, and synagogues, you don't find people using the word Allah. But wherever, no matter what the word is being used, whenever somebody is talking about or calling out to the creator of the universe, their own creator, a human being calls, oh, my creator, then that person is really calling upon, in Arabic, Allah. In Arabic, we would say Allah, or in English, the God. So the God in Islam is not really a God of just one community or, of one language or one group. It's really dependent on the definition. If somebody calls to the creator, they're talking about the same God. And then, the discussions go deeper. So, okay, and I'll add something more on this. Quran also says that God, sent prophets to each and every community. There is not a nation or a tribe to whom prophets were not sent. So, by name, we know only about 24 or 25 prophets in the Islamic tradition. But we know the Prophet said that there were 124,000 prophets sent across the whole world. And what we also know in our scriptures is that one of the first prophets, they came to India. Like, Prophet Adam, the very first, and even Nuh. We have traditions pointing out that, they were the very first ones, they came to India. So across the world, Korea, China, Japan, wherever there have been people, God has sent, messengers or prophets to tell them about that their creator is a loving God and they must serve him. So in different languages, of course, they would have called upon God with different names according to different languages. And this also is said in the Quran that, in your differing colors of skin and your languages, they are signs of God. So even God has created all these different languages. So God has created languages, God has created different skins. Somebody's black, somebody's brown, somebody's fair, somebody's Chinese, somebody's Indian. So God has created. So Quran claims that, in your different structures or, skin colors and your languages, they are signs of God. So even languages have been, taught by God to man. And we'll discuss this a bit more later. So in chapter 30, verse 22, it says, okay, here is I was quoting this verse. And of his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your languages and your colors. Indeed, in that are signs for those of knowledge. So Quran says that people of knowledge, they are able to see, when they ponder upon the different languages and the different skin colors, they are able to understand, God better and see them as a sign of their creator. So whether it be Hindi, Sanskrit, Arabic, English, German. So in the Quran, we believe, they are all signs of God. Japanese, Chinese, Thai, they're all signs of God. God has created all these different languages. And in Quran, chapter 55, verse 4, which is called Surah Rahman, it says, Ar-Rahman, who taught the Quran, he created man and has taught him articulate speech. So even speaking, Quran claims, has been taught by God. And to be specific, Ar-Rahman. So God has, several names, and one of the names God has is Ar-Rahman. And this name comes in Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim as well. So Ar-Rahman means, intensely loving, caring, and merciful. So again, different languages would have different names for calling out to the same creator of the universe, or creator of human beings. So in Arabic, Allah or Ar-Rahman. So another verse says, chapter 17, verse 110, about God. How we Muslims understand. Muslims means those who are really, truly sticking to the Quran. Those Muslims, they say, call upon Allah or call upon Ar-Rahman. Whichever name you call, to him belongs the best names. So in Arabic, there are several, God has several names. We say, there are 99 names. Actually, there are more, but, we generally say 99 names of God. So in Arabic itself, there are, in just one language, there are 99 names of God. And there are so many languages. And each language has a name for the same God. So the idea of God in Islam is not really like just a God of a community or a people or of a geographical location. It really is a God who was there since the very beginning, who was sending prophets across the world and calling people to, his path. So now, for what purpose did God create us, mankind? And we'll be discussing this much later when I'll be talking about the Prophet's life and his mission. But, in Arabia, there were a lot of infighting or fighting or violence happening between different tribes. I'll talk more about it later when I talk about the Prophet and his life. So basically, it's really a comment on that. And, these conflicts have been there everywhere around the world. So in somebody who's really sincere to the Quran, that person realizes that God has not created us for enmity, but God has created us for friendship. Chapter 14 and verse 13 says, "O mankind, we created you from a single pair of male and female, Adam and Eve, one man and woman." And that's how, all human beings came out to be, and made you into nations and tribes. There are different nations and different tribes within that nation. So like in the Arabian nation, there are several tribes. In Indian nation, there are several tribes. In Russian nation, there would be several tribes. In European nation, there are several tribes. And we made you into nations and tribes that you may know each other. Why have been you created? You have been created differently so that you may know each other, not that you might hate each other. Surely the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is he who is the most righteous of you. The one who is most righteous of you, he is, higher in the sight of God. So God did not create us for enmity. God created us for friendship. It's, politically minded people who turn this around and start talking about God of enmity and hatred. So we come back to, again, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, this verse which is there, which is at the beginning of each chapter of the Quran except one. It says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which means in the name of the God. Bismillah, Allah is the God. Ar-Rahman means the intensely loving, caring, and merciful one. And Ar-Rahim means the continuously loving, caring, and merciful one. So in Islam, in the Quran, God is not a God who's of hate, who doesn't care, who's arrogant and punishing, but he's a God of love, care, and mercy, intensely and continuously loving, caring, merciful. That's the idea of God. That's why, he didn't create us for enmity. He really created us to be his servants. Now in Islam, uh, Tawheed is very important. But in our times, I found, even in my own life, I was meeting many scholars and people, and they were talking about Tawheed. Tawheed means monotheism, that the idea that there's only one God. And they would say Tawheed is most important, and you cannot, if you cross Tawheed, you're gone, you're doomed. And they would always talk about La ilaha illallah, which is, this one. Pragya, can you see the blue highlighted thing when I'm highlighting?
Yes,
Okay,
Basit bhai, we can see it.
Okay. So they would only talk about La ilaha illallah. This is what it says in Arabic. And that there's God is one. God is one. God is one. But what they would not tell is another kalma, which is this, which is almost same as the first one, which says La ilaha illa huwa rahmanur rahim. So it says that there is no God but the intensely loving, caring, merciful, and the continuously loving, caring, merciful. So even Tawheed, they were presenting to me in a way that God would not come out to be, I wouldn't identify God as someone who's loving, caring, and merciful. They would, emphasize a lot about his oneness, but they would not talk about him being Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, loving, caring, and merciful. So there's this verse in the Quran, chapter 20, verse 5. I've highlighted that now. It says, Ar-Rahman walil arshustawa. Ar-Rahman, intensely loving, caring, merciful, is established on the throne. Actually, this is the real Tawheed of Islam. That on the throne of authority, on the throne of Godhood, there is only Ar-Rahman, intensely loving, caring, and merciful. So I tell my students that if you believe that God is one, but if you believe, God is someone who is happy with your hatred, who's happy with your cursings, who's happy with your enmity, then you might be talking about one God, but that's not the God of Islam. You might be saying La ilaha illallah, but who's Allah? How do you define Allah? Even those who were opposing the Prophet and opposing the Quran, they also used the word Allah. But their Allah was different. Their Allah was not loving, caring, and merciful. Who is your Allah when you say, I believe in one God? Who is that one? That is what is important, and that is what really matters. That do you believe that one is Ar-Rahman, or you don't believe that one is Ar-Rahman or not? So if you don't believe, sorry, your God and my God is different. Even if you will say La ilaha illallah, sorry, your God and the God of the Prophet and the Quran and Islam is different. Even if you're using the word Allah, we are not talking about the same God. Quran is not talking about the same God. So in Tawheed, or monotheism in Islam, is really connected to the idea of Ar-Rahman. So, and many times, young people are not told that one of the big fights or reasons of conflict between the Prophet and the Arabs of that time was that they were not willing to accept a God of love. This they do not highlight. I've heard many scholars talk about the biography of the Prophet and, what all happened, but they would not highlight this. That one of the main problems was that the enemies of the Prophet, they were not willing to accept God to be Ar-Rahman, because they were so given into hatred and their life of taking revenge and committing violence and, making the conflict go on and on. And one of the proofs of that is that, otherwise I've, in my different talks, I've mentioned several places in the Quran and the Prophet's life where this is very clear. But Sulh Hudaybiyah was one of the treaties which the Prophet did with his enemies, which was a peace treaty. And in that peace treaty, the Muslims had written in the name of Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And his enemies, they came and said, cut off Ar-Rahman. We don't believe God to be Ar-Rahman. Let Allah be there, but cut off Ar-Rahman, strike out Ar-Rahman. So this is not highlighted that, they did not really have a problem with using the word Allah, but they had a major problem identifying God as somebody, as someone who's, loving, caring, and merciful. So in Islam, that's the reason why, the Prophet had put Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim at the beginning of the Quran, and each chapter except one, that, before you talk about Allah, know that Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, loving, caring, and merciful. Now, when we talk about God, on the other hand, there's this idea of shaitan, Satan. Satan, is a creature of God. He's not God, he's a creature of God, like me and you. And he doesn't have any special powers or anything. But, like I can ask you to do evil things or influence you to do evil things, being a creature. So also shaitan is like a creature, who influences people towards doing evil. And on the right side are some of the qualities of shaitan, as comes in the Quran or Islam, that he's racist. He's the person who did the first act of racism. It comes in the story of Adam alayhi salam, Adam, that he said, oh, he's of the earth and I'm from fire, I'm superior. He's a supremacist. He's a hater. He's haughty, he's arrogant, he's full of envy. He desires evil for others, destruction for others. And he rebels against loving, caring, and merciful Allah. It comes in the Quran, at one place, chapter 19, verse 44, that Satan is a rebel against Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahman is intensely loving, caring. So shaitan is actually rebelling against the God of love, care, and mercy. So, he desires that humans should be cut off from servantship of Allah or the God who is loving, caring, merciful. And he plots to make humans, walk in his footsteps. So these are the qualities which are, connected with shaitan or evil. And any person who connects with these ideas, these things, that person is becoming like shaitan. That person is becoming like shaitan. So Quran says that, division, discord, hate, conflict, enmity, envy, it's brought by, evil spirits. Shaitan is like a spirit. And also evil human beings. And these evil spirits and human beings have been given the title of shaitan. They are being given the title of shaitan. And this comes in Quran 114:6, that the shaitan are from among spirits and mankind. Minal jinnati wan nas. From amongst jinn and mankind, spirits and mankind. So what does Satan want? And a person of faith who believes in Islam must be aware, what does shaitan really want? And I tell my students, this, I make sure that my students always remember in their life that what does shaitan really want? So chapter 17, verse 53, Quran says, and tell my servants to say that which is best, that which is most beautiful, to always talk in a beautiful way, to always, that their speech should always be beautiful. Indeed, Satan induces conflicts among them. Indeed, Satan is ever to mankind a clear enemy. It doesn't say Satan is ever to Muslims a clear enemy. It says mankind. That Satan is not just an enemy to Muslims, it's enemy to all human beings. And it wants conflict to come between all human beings. Like, we human beings, we are such foolish, we are such fools. We might fight over, languages. But, if you think, all languages are of God. Satan's aware, and the real thing Satan wants is, to induce conflict amongst mankind. And when I, as a person of faith, look at the world today, I find, that we are surrounded by conflicts everywhere. It's Satan who's doing it, using mankind and spirits, to cause all these conflicts. Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, one of the prophets, he said, it comes in Quran, chapter 12, verse 5, Surah Yusuf. He said, "O my son, do not relate your dream to your brothers, or they will contrive against your plan. They will conspire against you if you tell your dream." I'm not going into the story. So, Prophet Yusuf, he saw a dream that, he'll be lifted up above his brothers, and he narrated to his father, and the father said, "Do not tell this dream to your brothers. They will conspire against you. Indeed, Satan to man is a manifest enemy. It's a clear enemy." So, again, Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam is not saying that Satan to Yusuf or Satan to the believers or Satan to Muslims is a clear enemy. So Quran again and again says, Satan to mankind, to human beings, is a clear enemy, and it wants, conflict. So Prophet Yusuf, to whom this was said, so the father, Prophet Yaqub, said this to his son, Prophet Yusuf. And when Prophet Yusuf, he grew up, and towards the end of this chapter and at the end of the story, he resolved the conflict between his brothers and himself. And, his brothers tried to murder him, took away his family, his homeland, made him practically an orphan, betrayed him, attempted to kill him. On their part, it would have been a murder also, but, Prophet Yusuf was saved. And after a long, long time, those brothers met him again. They didn't recognize that he's Yusuf, and Yusuf came to a position of power. It's a very interesting story. And then, when those brothers realized that, oh, this is Yusuf, our brother whom we tried to kill, and they became very scared. They became really scared that when we were in power, we beat him and we tried to murder him and threw him in the well. And now he's in power and we stand in front of him. Now what will happen? So, Prophet Yusuf forgave them and, forgave them and again made a relationship with them. And this is when he says in the end, in Quran chapter 12, verse 100, that he, which is God, was indeed good to me when he took me out of prison and brought you all here out of the desert, even after Satan had sown enmity between me and my brothers. So again, Quran is very clear that any enmity that we see has been created by a Satan. And Satan could be me, you, it could be a human being creating that conflict. So anybody who's working on creating enmity, anybody who's working on creating hatred is in a way working for Satan or is Satan. And the job of the servants of God, we'll go more into this when we discuss what is the role of a faithful, is to, work against what Satan is doing. So their job is to, work against enmity. If Satan sows enmity, they have to sow friendship between people. If Satan is sowing hatred, then they have to sow, love. So what is the role of a faithful? Who is a faithful in the understanding of Islam? So we have seen who's God, we have seen who's Satan. Now, who is a faithful? The main quests that I found, related to what we are discussing right now, in context of what we are discussing right now, the main quest would be that, we human beings are one family, children of Adam and Eve, which is very clear in the Quran. That, yes, you might find yourself in different groups, Jews and Christians and Muslims and Hindus, but you are all children of Adam and Eve. You are one family in a way. Another quest which is set in front of, a faithful is to always be aware of the enemy. Do not follow footsteps of Shaitan. Quran says this. Do not follow footsteps of Shaitan. In Surah Nur and at other places also, Quran says. So otherwise you will end up where Shaitan is. He's somebody who creates enmity, who spreads hatred and division. So do not follow the footsteps of Shaitan. And one of the things, how people follow footsteps of Shaitan is that, they spread negative news. They spread conspiracy theories. They spread their insecurities, which may be baseless, which may not have any real foundations. So do not follow footsteps of shaitan. Otherwise, you will end up how he wants you to, full of, supremacist attitude, hatred, enmity, violence. Another question is to follow the friend. Quran says in chapter 28, verse 77, behave as Allah behaves with you. Behave with others as God behaves with you. So how does God behave with us? Quran says in chapter 13, verse 6, that your God is full of forgiveness for mankind. Chapter 16, verse 61, Quran says, if I were to catch people for their mistakes, there would not be a single living creature on the back of this earth. At, Surah Isra, Quran says, Allah says that, oh, human beings, I have given you honor. In chapter 55, Surah Rahman, one verse is repeated again and again. Which of my favors will you deny? So the beginning of Sharia, I tell my students that the beginning of Sharia is this. Behave as Allah behaves with you. So, he's full of forgiveness for mankind. That's how he's behaving with you. You also must be full of forgiveness for others. If God says, if I were to catch people for their mistakes, there would not be a single living creature on this earth. So you must also not catch people for their mistakes. If God has honored humanity, then you must also honor human beings. If God says, which of my favors will you deny? That God has done so many favors on others that you must also do so many favors on others that people may not be able to recount or count, how many favors you have done on them. So this is the beginning of Sharia. And those who really do not follow this, they are the ones, according to Islam, who would really be punished. That who do not behave as God behaves with them. They are the ones who will be punished. If they find God to be merciful, loving, caring, providing, whereas, overlooking their mistakes, yet they don't behave like this, then they are the ones, who will be punished. And this concept is not really made clear to by many scholars to Muslims. They generally talk about sectarian things, and they hardly talk anything about the Quran. Hardly. That's really the position right now. There are some good scholars. I'm not saying there's no one. There are some good people in different sects also. Who really talk about what the Quran really stands for. But mostly, what I have found, I give witness to, is that most of the scholars, they are more interested in their sectarian things rather than what the Quran really says. So another task according to the Quran, in front of each human being is called tazkiyah. Tazkiyah means to purify. The concept of zakat. Zakat means to purify your wealth. So it's like charity. So it's from that same word, tazkiyah, which means to purify yourself. And Quran says in chapter 91, verse 9, he succeeds who purifies himself. In Islam, we believe every child is born in purity. Every child was born pure. I, me, you, everyone. I, me, okay. I'm two people. I, me, you, everyone was born in a pure state. How were we born? The Prophet said, everybody is born in Islam. And Islam, again, it's not just a religion of one community, but it's a religion which was there since the very beginning, in different languages, called in different way. Like God was called in different words, that same religion was called in different ways. But understand the idea that every child is born in Islam. And if you observe a child, you'll get to know what Islam is. If the Prophet is saying that every child is born in Islam, it's a duty for a believer to, study a child, a baby. What state is a baby, born in? Umar Khayyam, poet, mystical poet, Sufi poet, he said, when the original cause formed me, the first lesson given to me was love. It's then that my heart was formed. The original cause, God. When God formed me, the first lesson that I was given was love. A child is not born hating anyone. A child is born willing to love whoever is in front of him without any judgments. Whether the father is poor or rich, whether the mother is ugly or beautiful, whether, whoever they are, what faith, what religion they are from, a child is born in a state where he is willing to love. And that's what, a state of a person who's really in Islam is, that he's willing to love whoever is in front of him or her. And that's the pure state. That's the pure state. So Islam calls people to, ponder. Am I in a state I was born in? Because you will only succeed if you purify yourself. And if you corrupt yourself, the next verse, chapter 91, verse 10 says, the whoever corrupts himself will surely fail. So am I pure or not? That's the question one Quran asks the believers to think about and ponder. That am I in a state I was born in or not? Because what is impurity? We say, Quran says that Satan actually brings impurity in human beings. Chapter 5, verse 91, it says, Satan's plan is to excite enmity and hatred between you with intoxicants and gambling, and hinder you from the remembrance of the God and from prayer. Will you not then stop? This is one of my social experiments, that wherever I go, I ask Muslims that why alcohol is forbidden. Even non-Muslims know that, Muslims don't drink alcohol. Even a small child in a Muslim family is taught that alcohol is haram, is forbidden. And a practicing Muslim, even runs away from a drop of alcohol. Even from, if a drop might fall and, he'd run away. I have met people, who, once I was somewhere and there was this bottle in a shape of alcohol bottle. It was not really alcohol bottles. These are bottles where, there are cork on it and you remove, but they're really water bottles. So it was such a bottle, at one place, and that person, maybe he was not aware, and he thought that I will not have water. He was like, okay, I want water. But, when that bottle came in, he was like, I'm not having water from this bottle. And I was like, why? He said, this is an alcohol bottle. Sometime, there was an alcohol in this water bottle, I was like, no, this is a water bottle. And these days, they are designing bottles in this shape with a cork, and, you open it. Most of you must have seen it, those kind of bottles. So he's like, yet I will not have it because it resembles the shape of an alcohol bottle. So this is to some extent, some people are when it comes to alcohol in the Muslim community. And I ask, Muslims wherever I go, why is alcohol forbidden? And they're not able to give the right answer. I've even asked some scholars at times, and they're not able to give a complete answer, if I may put it like that. Nobody says, hatred and enmity in the Muslim community. That's my experience. That's my social experiment. I've been doing it for last 2 years, maybe, or more. And nobody has ever given me the right answer or a complete answer. Everybody, says that they give the similar reason, like, don't drink and drive. But if you think, in this verse, it also talks about gambling. I'm highlighting gambling. In gambling, you don't need to, you can't say don't gamble and drive, right? Your mind is in place, but everybody gives the same reason. For alcohol, that, don't drink and drive, you lose your mind and all. But the reason which Quran really gives is enmity and hatred. I'm highlighting enmity and hatred. This nobody speaks, nobody tells. When I was going to those scholars, nobody, they would tell, stay away from alcohol, but they didn't tell, stay away from enmity and hatred. They were not telling me, stay away from enmity and hatred. And I started to think that why are those scholars who talk about enmity and hatred not telling me why really alcohol and gambling, both, are forbidden in Islam? Maybe because I would turn to them and say, Maulana Sahib, your bayan, your sermon is haram. It's prohibited because through your sermon, I got enmity and hatred in my heart. Maybe that's why, the extremists, they don't tell. And there are good Maulanas and, of course, extremists. Like in every community, in every religion, there are people of good faith who talk about positive things, and there are people who would act to be religious, but they would have, negativity in their heart. That's why we have these conflicts, right? So imagine, in Islam, in Quran, something that gets connected to enmity and hatred, that becomes forbidden. So I tell them that, you run away from alcohol, but, you swim in the ocean of enmity and hatred. I tell to the people, not all Muslims are like, but some extremists that I find, that you swim in hatred and enmity while you run away from alcohol. What kind of a stupid idiot you are. I might not use such strong words, depending on who I'm talking to, but that's what they are, stupid and idiots, fools. That, you're running away from alcohol, but you have, opened bars of enmity and hatred. That whoever comes to you and speaks or listen to your political view and all, that person starts to get filled with, hatred and enmity towards someone else. So you are fools that you run away from alcohol, but you have opened a bar of enmity and hatred. So Quran says, it's because of enmity and hatred that alcohol and gambling is haram, is forbidden. I know there are some Muslims in this session also, I hope you remember and tell people that why really alcohol is forbidden in Islam. And go and tell your family that, you never told us why it was haram. Why is alcohol haram? But today we learned it's because of enmity and hatred. It's Quran chapter 5, verse 91. And if somebody asks, or even show them the reference, that go read. So the Satan's plans to excite hatred and enmity and hinder you from the remembrance of Allah, it continues, and from prayer. So remembrance of Allah and from prayer. Will you not then stop? So when this verse was revealed, the companions of the prophets, they had barrels of alcohol at their homes, they would have, and they all started to throw their alcohol in the drains after this verse came. Because they wanted to be, stay away from hatred and enmity. But, I say, some people, they give incomplete answer. So they say, oh, it's forbidden because it cuts you from remembrance of Allah and prayer. So they quote this, but they don't quote excite enmity and hatred. So they don't quote this. Many people, I said, they did not give complete answer. They skip enmity and hatred, and they just talk about remembrance of Allah and from prayer. If you ask them why is alcohol forbidden, they'll say this. They'll not quote enmity and hatred. So let's look in Islam, what is remembrance of Allah and what is prayer? So what is remembrance of Ar-Rahman? Quran 43:36 says, and whoever turns away from remembrance of Ar-Rahman, we appoint for him Shaitan to be an intimate companion to him. So whoever forgets that his creator is Ar-Rahman, Quran says that any human being who forgets that his creator is intensely loving, caring, and merciful, we appoint for him Shaitan. Somebody who's negative, full of hatred, wants enmity, wants war, wants conflict, we appoint for him as Shaitan to be an intimate companion. So either one stays in remembrance that God is intensely loving, caring, merciful, or one becomes like, a servant of Hitler, a colonial power, or a Pharaoh. What was Pharaoh doing? Pharaohs had made whole nations their slaves, and they were doing a lot of evil, a lot of zulm, oppression. What was colonial powers doing? Going and turning the whole world into their slaves. What was Hitler's and his servants doing? I tell my students that I ask them, what does the servant of a sweet maker do? And they say, make sweets. I say, what does the servant of a tailor do? And they say, stitch clothes. I say, what would the servant of Hitler do? They'll say, oppress people, put them in gas chambers. I say, whose servant are you? Always remember that. The servant of Hitler will have to, kill people, beat them up, oppress them, put them in gas chambers, kill. That's what, and if the servant of Hitler does not do this, Hitler would punish him. If a servant of Hitler would come, walk to Hitler and said, oh, I found these many people there and I freed them and I gave them money and I gave them food, Hitler would fire that servant. Hitler would want to hear from his servant that these many people I put in the gas chamber, these many people I, killed, these many children, I took away from their mothers. That's what Hitler wants to hear. So what does remembrance of Ar-Rahman mean? It's exact opposite of being a servant of Hitler. If you became servant of Hitler, you would know what would it require from you. That one remembers my master is Hitler. You would know what your job is. So what does it mean to remember that my God is Ar-Rahman? So to remember that my creator, the creator of this universe, is Ar-Rahman, loving, caring, and merciful, and I'm his servant, means you also need to be loving, caring, and merciful. That's what it means. Otherwise, it's not really about, just reading a tasbih, like a prayer bead, saying Ar-Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman. It's not really about that. Then you're just producing a sound. The Prophet said that time would come on Muslims that the Quran will go till their throat. It will not go into their heart. So, if you're just doing Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman on a prayer bead, but, you're not letting it go down into your heart, what does it mean? To be a servant of Ar-Rahman, to be a servant of loving, caring, and merciful God. What does it mean to be a servant of a tailor? If you don't question that and then say Ya Rahman, Ya Rahman, you're not really remembering him. And if you're not remembering, God says we appoint for him a shaitan. And shaitan, what does he do? Enmity and hatred. So remembrance of Allah. So if you remember Allah, you'll again be turning towards love, care, and mercy. Then that verse also talks about prayer, worship. Why alcohol is forbidden. Just in case somebody is going, not being able to see from where we are discussing this, we are talking about alcohol being forbidden and why. Hatred and enmity. And I said that some people only quote this, remembrance of Allah, and from prayer. So we just discussed, what does remembrance of Allah mean? What would remembrance that you are servant of Hitler mean? What would the remembrance that I am servant of a tailor mean? So Satan cuts you off from remembrance of Allah, and Allah is loving, caring, and merciful. So actually, remembrance of Allah means that the Satan is cutting you off, stopping you from love, care, and mercy by stopping you from remembrance of Allah and from prayer. Now, what does prayer lead to in Islam? In Islam, what does prayer lead you to? Worship lead you to? Many young people in Muslims community, when they ask, why did God create us? They're generally called, sorry, the reference is wrong. It is Surah 56, verse 51. This verse, I just realized. So if by chance anybody is noting reference, it's 56, 51. Over here it says 551. So 56, 51. In chapter 56, verse 51, they're told this verse that, God said, I did not create the
Surah Zariyat.
Yeah. That I did not create the spirits and mankind except to worship me. That's what they're generally told. That, Allah created you, God created you so that you may worship him. Now, young people, they ask, and I meet so many young people, they say, why did God create us to worship him? What did he need? And when they question, generally people say, don't question, don't think, you'll get misguided. They even stop thinking. And Quran, continuously says, tawassum, tadabbur, tafakkur, which means to reflect, think, ponder. Quran promotes thinking, questioning. And generally people say to young people, don't question. God created you for worship, just worship. However, Quran even tells, why did God create worship? Okay, we were created for worship, but for what purpose was worship created? So it says in Quran chapter 2, verse 21, O mankind, worship your Lord, who created you and those before you, so that you may become muttaqi. Muttaqi literally means God conscious. Somebody who's conscious of who his God is, who his master is. The servant of the tailor is conscious, my master is a tailor. So worship is there to make you God conscious. Okay, man created for worship. Worship created to make you God conscious, make you muttaqi. Muttaqi is someone, it comes from the word taqwa, and the one who has taqwa consciousness is a muttaqi. Now, what happens by becoming a muttaqi? At third place, Quran says, in chapter 5, verse 2, do not let the hatred of a people who once barred you from the sacred mosque provoke you to transgress, cooperate with one another in goodness and taqwa. So it says again, the word hatred appears in this verse. I'm highlighting just the word hatred. Do not let the hatred of a people who once barred you from the sacred must provoke you to transgress. Do not let hatred, dictate your actions. That's what this verse says. Become muttaqi. Become muttaqi. The one who has taqwa, the last word I'm highlighting now, taqwa. The one who has taqwa is like money. The one who has money is rich. So taqwa is the quality, and the one who has taqwa is muttaqi. Muttaqi was highlighted in the verse in the green area, muttaqi. So what happens when you become muttaqi? Hatred does not dictate your actions. So even worship, takes us to a position where you're not dictated by hatred. If you're not dictated by hatred, what would you be dictated by? If you're continuously in your prayer, in your namaz, or any worship, you're starting it with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, who is intensely loving, caring, merciful. You will not end up being a person of hate. You cannot. If you're praying Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, if you're saying Ar-Rahmanir Rahim in your prayer, Muslims, read these verses in the prayer. Intensely loving, caring, merciful, continuously loving, caring, merciful. You cannot become a man of hatred. So God did create us for worship, but worship was created us to make us muttaqi. And what happens when you become muttaqi? Hatred does not dictate you. Hatred is not able to control you. What is able to control you? Love. So we can say God created us for love. God created us so that we may love and live with love with each other. In Islam, we have been talking about Ar-Rahman, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. God, who's God? God is Ar-Rahman, intensely loving, caring, merciful. There's a hadith, the Prophet said, God created 100 portions of Rahim. Rahim means love, care, and mercy, and only gave one to the mother. And it is because of that one portion that mothers, they love their children. A mother would never want, conflict between her children. A mother would never want, her children to be fighting. So, if you are brothers and sisters, your parents did not have, more than one child, and thought of you having a brother or a sister so that you might fight. God also did not create us for hatred. God created us so that we might live in love. So even worship and remembrance of God takes you towards love and not towards hate. Now, that we have understood and explored, the position of the God in Islam and what does it stand for, or who's a faithful and what does Satan do, comes a question that are non-Muslims enemies? Of course, the extremists of every faith, not just Muslims, they would project people of other faith as the enemy. So are non-Muslims enemies? Whosoever they don't like most, to others they'll say, oh no, they are friends, Christians are, Quran says Christians are friends, and the Jews are like this and the Hindus are like that. They'll build such narratives. So I'm taking this in general, are non-Muslims enemies? Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we believe he was always a Muslim, though he got his prophethood mission when he was 40 years old. And his life of those first 40 years is also an example for us, because he was a man of faith. And he was living with people who did not share his faith, his belief that God is loving, caring, merciful. And he earned the title of being Al-Amin and As-Sadiq. Al-Amin means the trustworthy, the honest. As-Sadiq means the righteous, the truthful. From non-Muslims, not from Muslims. So, of course, he was not treating them as his enemy. If he would have, he wouldn't have earned these titles. Enemies don't give such titles. So, the Prophet, he always believed in a God who is Rabbul Alameen. This is the very second verse that you would find in the Quran, and in the first chapter. It begins Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So Rabbul Alameen, you'll find this in the second verse of the Quran. What does Rabbul Alameen mean? That I'm saying, the Prophet was a Muslim and he believed in a God who was Rabbul Alameen. So Rabb means the sustainer God, God who's, your sustainer. And Alameen means, for everyone, let's say. So, a companion of the Prophet was asked, what does Alameen mean? And he said, Muslims are in Alam, Jews are in Alam, Christians are in Alam, the polytheists are in Alam, the spirits are in Alam, the angels are in Alam, and when they all combine, it becomes Alameen. So in Quran also, Pharaoh asked Musa alayhi salam that, who is this Rabbul Alameen you're talking about? And he said, the God of everything there is between, the sustaining Lord of everything there is between the skies and the earth. So God is Rabbul Alameen, his son, a God whose sun shines on a Muslim and a Hindu and a Buddhist and a Jew and a Christian, a believer in God, an atheist. That's the God the Prophet believed in, that whose sun shines on everyone, whose rain falls on your field as well as the field of your enemy. When I take sessions with, my students, I tell them, how do you find the clouds? Do they say, oh, we'll, only give rain on a Muslim's field and not a Hindu's field? Do you find sun saying that, oh, I'll only shine on a believer and not somebody who does not believe? No. The religion of the universe, not just human, certain human being, but the whole religion of the universe is Rabbul Alameen. They have faith in Rabbul Alameen. That's what the sun is doing. That's what the clouds are doing. That's what the rivers are doing. That's what the winds are doing. That's what the oceans are doing. They are all giving witness that our God, our creator, is Rabbul Alameen. He's the God of everyone, and not just one community, one group, one set of people. But in Arabia, that's where the conflict began with the Prophet. When he came out giving these ideas, they were very, troubled, the people in Arabia at that time. And they were like, we can't accept this God, because they had tribal gods. Each tribe had his own God. Each tribe had his own God. And, when those tribes would go to war with each other, each tribe would pray to their tribal God and saying, oh, reduce, humiliate that tribe and also humiliate the God of that tribe. And, the other tribe would be doing the same. And, in those times in Arabia, infant girls were, buried in sand. And people will not have any mercy on those, newborn infant girls. In India, even now, there's a lot of female feticide. Now with, science has developed. So now people, they do ultrasound and they, if it's a girl, I'm not saying everyone, but, we know where we are living. So especially in Haryana and Rajasthan, the female to male ratio is very, very skewed, especially in these two states, but other places also. So, they would kill newborn girls, bury them in the sand. And the Prophet said, what good are your gods if they don't stop you from doing this? God is a God of love, care, and mercy. You can't do this. He'll question you. He'll punish you for doing this. And, you're fighting and you're thinking, my God will humiliate your God and you. No. God is one whose sun is shining on your tribe as well as the other tribe. Now, those people were so full of enmity and hatred for each other. They were like, if we start listening to him, then what will happen to our conflicts? What will happen to our politics? What will happen to, our traditions of, burying infant girls, let's say? He's just, going to transform the community. And that's where the conflict really started. And the Prophet was saying, be dedicated to one God of love. Tawheed, that Ar-Rahmanu alal arsh istawa, that there's only the God of love, care, and mercy and authority. Bring the God of love, care, and mercy on your throne of authority. That is Tawheed. And live your life according to that. So this they could not accept. And they started to, persecute the Prophet and the companions. So the Prophet said, there's no compulsion in religion. Truth stands out clear from error. You say, my God is true and your God is not true. The tribes would say that. He'd say, but, my God will not serve you. My God will only serve me. But, he would say, look at the sun. The God of the sun, serves everyone, you and the other. And if you don't want to accept this, you want to remain a fool, go. There's no compulsion in religion. Truth stands out clear from error. And when they came to the point of, fighting and killing, and they killed many, many companions of the Prophet and even tried to kill the Prophet many times, the Prophet said, it comes in the Quran, to you your religion and to me mine. Okay, let's agree to disagree. Let's agree to disagree. To you your religion and to me mine. But this also, they did not accept. And they said, you have to take back all that you have been teaching, and you have to come to what, our society already holds. So they had a problem because, it's recorded in history that, tribes, there would be tribes, who would fight with each other for seven generations. They would even not know why they are fighting, but they would be fighting. A conflict would be going on between two tribes for 7 generations. And if you ask somebody, why are you fighting the other tribe? They'll say, we don't know. They are just enemies. They even forgot from where the conflict began. They'd had many narratives and many things why they should fight. And a man would die, calling his sons, saying, while he's dying, that take revenge, don't leave that tribe. Take revenge from them. And if you, remember me and, kill those people, he would die. And suddenly the idea of a God who's loving, caring, and merciful for everyone, and you need to follow him. People were like, we'll have to break the oaths we gave to our fathers, that we'll take revenge from them. So it was a bit complicated when the Prophet started to preach. So anyways, the Prophet even said, to you your religion, to me mine. Okay, you follow what you want to follow, and I'll follow what I'll follow. So when they became enemies and they were killing, these verses of the Quran came. And these verses are many times highlighted by the extremists on both sides. On both sides, I mean the Muslim extremists as well as the non-Muslim extremists. They would highlight verses like this. For example, I myself have caught red-handed 5 times. Caught red-handed means, when face to face, like there. Scholars who talked about chapter 60, verse 1 to 6. Even on WhatsApp groups, somebody were forwarding, these verses. Do not be friends. These are 1 to 6 are very long verses. This is in brief what it says. So in brief, the idea in these verses is, do not be friends. Do not show love to the kafir. Kafir, I'll talk about it. What is kafir? Any who does so has gone against religion. These are really, really long verses, so I cannot quote over here. So they would, I've found scholars, quoting just chapter 60, verse 1 to 6. But they will not quote Quran, chapter 60, 7 to 9, verse 7 to 9 of the same chapter. So if you see, it's chapter 60, verse 1 to 6 that they would quote 1 to 6, and they'll stop there. They will not tell 7 to 9. They will not tell 7 to 9. And this has happened 5 times that I have seen myself happening. And I've contradicted people. Why didn't you not tell 7 to 9? I asked them, why did you stop at 6? Why did you not tell 7 to 9? Because 7 to 9 says, I do not forbid you from those kafir. Forbid you from what? From being friends. Because this is from where it starts. Do not be friends. 7 to 9 says, I do not forbid you from those kafir, from being friends, who don't persecute you, who are not killing you on account of your faith. That if you say, we believe in God who's loving, caring, and merciful, and we give up our enmities and our violence and our way of life and changing it, there are some kafir who don't fight you on that, then you are not forbidden to not be friends with them. You can be friends with them. If you show kindness and be just to them, I will love you. Imagine, Quran says that, if you show kindness and be just to a kafir, God would love you. This is a sentence in the Quran that, in the context of kafir, God says that if you be good to a kafir, I will love you. This is not something which the extremists show of both sides. So somebody who's, speaking against Islam, he will not show chapter 60, verse 7 to 9. And if it's a Muslim who's making other Muslims more extreme, of course, he'll also not show chapter 60, verse 7 to 9. Even though it's from the same chapter, they would stop at verse 6. They'll stop at verse 6 and not go to verse 7 to 9. So now who's a kafir? So this also tells, that Islam is not against, a kafir. This word is very popular. I'll go into it, what it means, but let's stick to the word kafir right now. So Islam is not really against a kafir who's not persecuting you because of your faith. If two neighbors, they have a fight over parking, that's not persecution. That's not persecution. If they fight and one kills the other, that's not what this verse is talking about. Persecution because of faith, that you believe that God is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, that the God is loving, caring, and merciful, and will not let you believe and will persecute you. That's persecution. So if somebody is doing that, a kafir is doing that, then don't be friends. It's just like, I think several years ago, Pragya only asked me this question that, Pragya or someone, asked me this question in dialogue class only, that why this, why even this, why not be friends? I gave an example that if a child would be, giving you trouble, bullying you in the school, your mother would say, don't be friends with him. Somebody who does not bully you, go be friends with him. That's exactly what the Quran is saying. If somebody persecutes you, a kafir who's persecuting you, don't be friends with them, because they'll bully you, they'll call you, and they'll murder you. Don't be friends with them. But a kafir who is not persecuting you, be friends. And in fact, if you be good to him, God will love you. So what is this word kafir? Kafir literally means, somebody who has denied, who has said no. Somebody to whom the idea of who's Allah, who's the creator of this universe, if I go beyond the language, that the creator of this universe is loving, caring, and merciful, who understands this, who knows this, yet denies it and behaves against it, against what it demands, that person is a kafir, let's say. Somebody who understands Islam, every child is born on Islam. Somebody who understands Islam and yet works against it, even after understanding, that person is a kafir. So if somebody hasn't understood it, somebody who has not been, got to know it properly, that person is not a kafir. Kafir is somebody who has denied. It's like, I'll give you a simpler example. If, I go somewhere and I'm not offered water, when you reach somebody, hey, do you want water? And you say yes or no. So if I'm not being offered water, how can I say no? Only if I say no. Otherwise, I'm not a kafir. So not every non-Muslim is a kafir also. Generally, some people believe every non-Muslim is a kafir. No, every non-Muslim is not a kafir. Kafir is someone who has understood it correctly, properly, and yet says no. So that person is a kafir. And even with those kafir who says no, you can be friends with them. Chapter 60, verse 7 to 9. And if you be kind to them and just to them, it's a path of finding God's love. This is what Quran stands for, Islam stands for. One of the examples of this is that, the first migration that happened was not to Medina. So, when persecution really increased in Makkah on the Muslims, they migrated, they left the city of Makkah. That, okay, if you don't want us over here and you're persecuting us, we'll leave the city, we'll go somewhere else, we'll migrate. And it's called hijrat. But the first hijrat did not happen to Medina. Medina is, so if you can see Makkah over here, Makkah, Medina is up north. It's not even visible in this map. It's up north. But Abyssinia, so if from Makkah you see Jeddah, Jeddah is a port city. You just travel this much. It was a very easy way to travel to. Going to Medina was very difficult. It was at more distance and more difficult, as there was a lot of desert in the middle. But Jeddah was an easy travel. And from Jeddah, you go to Medina, to Abyssinia. Abyssinia is Ethiopia, present-day Ethiopia. So you just cross this ocean, and there were boats always, ferrying people across historically. So, there was trade, and there were, more ships going. So from Jeddah, you catch a ship, and you just go across. And that's Abyssinia, present-day Ethiopia, Habsha. One of the companions of the Prophet was called Bilal Habshi. Habshi means the Abyssinian, the Ethiopian. So the first migration happened to Abyssinia, Ethiopia, Habsh. And it was easier to go to Abyssinia than to go to Medina. And Abyssinia, by the way, was not a Muslim country. The Muslims were there just in Mecca. So the Prophet, he praised the non-Muslim king of Abyssinia and said that, he's a just king. Go to his place. He will not persecute you. And you'll not be wronged over there. And what does it mean that he'll not persecute you? Basically, he'll be following the principle of to you your religion and to me mine, which we discussed here. So if, somebody who might not follow your faith, Islam says they might not be Muslims, but if they say they agree to this, okay, to you your religion and to me mine. Let's agree to disagree. Basically, the king in Abyssinia had this value, and the Prophet praised him that he's a good man. He's a good king. He'll not persecute you. Even if he's not a Muslim, he's a good king. And he praised Abyssinian king and the Abyssinian kingdom. And the Muslims, migrated there. So it's an example of, how Muslims may live in a country where non-Muslims are in majority. So Abyssinia was a place where non-Muslims were in majority and they were not. And Makkah also, at this time, Muslims were not in majority. So they stayed and they lived in Abyssinia and they were not wronged there. And they loved, staying in Abyssinia as compared to Makkah, because Makkah, they were being persecuted. So now what about enemies? So why I talked about Abyssinia was that to show that Islam does not say that every non-Muslim is an enemy. Some kafir may be enemy, but what to do with them is the question. What about enemies? Like this verse, chapter 60, verse 1 to 6 talks about kafir who persecute you, who trouble you. So what about them? So Quran teaches in chapter 41, verse 34, and not equal are the good deed and the bad. So they're persecuting you, they're oppressing you, they're doing bad deeds to you. Repel the bad deed with a better deed, a more beautiful deed. Wala tastawil hasanatu wala sayyi. Hasan means beautiful, good. And this translation, it says better, which is not a wrong translation, but I'm just giving you the root of that word, beautiful. Repel evil deed by that which is more beautiful, better. And then you will see between whom and you was enmity, hatred, will become as if that person was your dear friend. So this formula is what the Quran preaches. At times I go to Muslim communities and my students, I tell them, and they're like, oh, enemies. I say, okay, fine. Enemies, fine. What are you doing to turn them into friends? How can we turn them into friends? And then they're like, we have never heard this idea. From where are you saying? I said, from the Quran. And I tell this verse, that Quran tells you a way, that good deed and bad deed are not equal. Repel evil with good. And your enemy will become your bosom friend, your dear friend. Why don't you implement this formula? If you say there are enemies, perceived or real, I'm not going into that, perceived or real. If you say there are enemies, then let's turn them into friends. And this, the extremists never tell. The extremist scholars, they never talk about this. The extremists, people with their own political agenda, they never talk about this verse. Never, ever you'll find them talking about this verse. Like you'll never, ever find them telling why alcohol is forbidden because of hatred and enmity. You'll never find them talking about this verse, that turn enemies into friends, because they don't want, to turn enemies into friends. So they're really impure, hypocrites who claim to be, following the Quran, but they are not following the Quran. So why not implement this formula? So a lot more can be said, but I'm coming to the conclusion that, so we have seen in this presentation that the idea of God, that the God in Islam is a God of love, care, and mercy. That's why, God says that it's Satan, it's evil that wants hatred and enmity and conflicts. Or let me just take you and highlight keywords. So God has created us for made you into nation tribes so that you may know each other. God has created us so that we may know each other, not that we might hate each other, because God is a God of love, care, and mercy. That's why He would teach this. And Tawheed in Islam is about God being one God, being the God of love, care, and mercy. If you separate love, care, and mercy, Ar-Rahman, from one God, then sorry, it's not the God of Islam. Even if somebody uses the word Allah, he's not talking about the God of the Prophet and the Quran. If he doesn't say Ar-Rahman is on the throne, then in Islam, because God is loving, caring, and merciful, that's why all these values, racism, hatred, arrogance, these are all evil qualities, because the God of a religion who's loving, caring, and merciful, of course, these values would be negative. It says we are from one set of parents, male and female. And it teaches God does not want conflict. Satan wants conflict. Because God is loving, caring, and merciful. So again, evil would automatically become conflict. If God is love, then hatred is evil. So Satan to mankind is a manifest enemy. God is not. The role of the faithful, that Satan sows enmity. Again, this is coming again and again in the Quran, this idea. And very few people really talk about it. Very few, and that's shocking. Mostly in the Muslim community, the scholars, they're such hypocrites. They only talk about sectarian divisions. They never talk about behave as Allah behaves with you, chapter 28, verse 77. They don't say, do not follow footsteps of shaitan. They don't talk about tazkiyah, that what state you were born in. You were not born hating. They don't tell that alcohol and gambling is forbidden because of enmity and hatred. They don't tell that remembrance of Allah leads you towards love. They don't say prayer, puts you in a position where hatred does not dictate your actions. We have discussed all this. Hatred does not dictate your action when you become a believer. Do not let hatred of a people, dictate your actions. We also discussed that non-Muslims are not treated as enemies. The place where we begin from is that all human beings are children, one family. So the place where we start about non-Muslims is not that they are enemies. And there's God, God is for everyone, not just Muslims. His sun shines on everyone, his rain falls on everyone. This is the God Quran talks about. There's no compulsion in religion. Let's agree to disagree. If you don't like this idea, let's agree to disagree. So you're not forbidden to be friends even with kafir, not just non-Muslims. Not every non-Muslim is a kafir. Even a non-Muslim who's a kafir, you're not forbidden to be a friend with him until and unless he persecutes you because of faith. We also looked into an example where Muslims, even in the time of the Prophet himself, they lived in a place where, in a non-Muslim country. And what about enemies? Quran says, turn enemies into your friends, that the enemy of today could be your friend tomorrow. Do not be hopeless. The Prophet said, hopelessness is kufr. Hopelessness is kufr. It's in our tradition, in a hadith. And generally, I found that in the Muslim community, this saying is told to somebody who's in depression. Hey, hopelessness, now meedi kufr hai. Hopelessness is kufr. This hadith was not for somebody who's in depression. This hadith was for people who believe that enemies of today will never be your friends of tomorrow. If you don't believe that enemy of today cannot be my friend tomorrow, then you are in kufr. Then you are becoming, you have a quality of being a kafir, because a kafir is hopeless. But a believer, a faithful, is never hopeless. And you turn enemies into friends because the God of love wants friendship. A mother wants friendship between her siblings, between her, children, sorry, not siblings. A mother wants friendship and love between her children. So God also wants friendship and love between people. And then there are some of my books, which are available on Amazon by the name The Secrets. And, these cover some, stories of the Quran, which highlight these values furthermore. So with this, I stop on this presentation, Dialogue in Context of Friendship and Enmity in Islam. Thank you so much. So if somebody has questions or something, you can ask. Over to you, Pragya.
Thank you so much, Basit Bhai. This was a wonderful talk. I'm hearing it for the second time, and it's really amazing. And your book is a capsule. It's just kind of the friendship and enmity in Islam. It brings everything together. Um, Reshmi had a couple of questions. Reshmi, if you could just ask your questions in the chat, please. If you could read them out, please.
Thank you so much, Professor. Very enlightening, very intriguing, very moving again, because speaking on religion and discussing it listening it as a monologue is very difficult because there are a lot of questions which emerges simultaneously. But I think the post texts which you added, like, when you're explaining the idea of kafir and how you shouldn't befriend a kafir, and then there is 7 to 9 of 60, verse 60. So I cannot really quote it like that, but if I remember it correctly, that 1 to 6 is being repeated again and again, and 7 to 9 is being skipped in a conversation when you speak to people and ask how you understand kafir, how you understand basically any kind of transgression from the faith, right? Like, you're talking about um it's very difficult for me to use the terminologies which are used in Islam, but I would like to just go back to the very first, initial stage of your explanation of, or making us understand how Islam understands God in reality. Why there is this thing? Why do we want to talk about one God? Like what you are telling us is that it is beyond oneness. It is much more than that. It is talking about emotions. It is talking about friendship. It is talking about love. It is talking about the continuity of those expressions. But then monotheism is about one absoluteness of God. So what is that obsession, and what is being propagated through that obsession,
Look,
is what I want to ask.
look, it's a very good question, and many of my students also ask me this question. Look, let me explain what the Prophet saw. Hmm? In his time, he saw several gods. None of them was stopping people from burying an infant born, girl in the sand. None of them was stopping from, continuously fighting with other tribes. In fact, gods were being used to support, one, our god of our tribe will, humiliate you and even your god. So he said, come to one. Come to the one whose sun shines on everyone. So for him, it was not that he got obsessed, but it is something he saw in the universe. That sun is also a creature of God and worships him. The clouds are also a creature of God and worship him. So one whose ideology pervades the whole universe, the Alameen vision, that, the idea which is, a water would quench your thirst and my thirst, and a Christian and a Jew and a Buddhist and an atheist thirst. So, he was calling all those people to that one God of love, care, and mercy. The Quran says at one place, what of a servant who has two masters? One master would call him in one direction, and the other master would call him in other direction. Can he serve? How would he serve if a person has two masters? So the Prophet was calling them to the God of the sun, the God of the river, the God of the cloud, that come to that one who's loving. And all your, these conflicts, these, violence, all this would end if you dedicate yourself.
Professor, but here, no, my question was directed to that the believers, the people, the one who propagates this and believes this, the scholars, they have obsession with reinforcing that it is monotheism, right? It's a monotheistic religion.
Yeah.
But not saying the more humanistic form, the more practicing form of the religion. So this was my question.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I said something.
Okay. Now I get it. Look, Reshmi, I myself, when I started out, I myself was like this. It takes, in Islam, we say marfat. Marfat means, realization. marfat of God to understand who God is. It's not just about oneness. It's about who that one is. And many people, they're just being uh, put into that kind of a thinking. And those who are putting them into that kind of thinking, I'm not saying that everybody who's in that thinking is like that, but the one from whom these ideas started, that just focus on one but not tell who that one is, they are those who are really politically minded. Negatively, there's good politics and bad politics, huh? Negatively politically minded. A time came that kings, they could not accept a God of love. How would they fight? How would they, create an army? How would they, conquer if they talk about God of love and, human being one family? So they had to, take out this idea of God being love and just focus on one. So, they paid scholars and, kings and evil religious scholars. They have a good combination always, evil people of religion and the rulers. So those kings and those, let's say those evil scholars, they started to take out Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. That, the definition of God, that who God is, and just focusing on Allah. But who is Allah? Let's take it out. Because the kings, they did not want it to fit into what a God of love demanded them to fit into. So what they did was, they made God fit into the kind of God they needed. And that's what, percolated to people down the line. I hope that answers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kulsum has a comment. Kulsum, if you could just share it.
Shall I read it out?
Yes, and if you want to add something, you please feel free to add that as well.
I mean, it was just an observation, and I am still very much kind of learning about not just my faith, but other faiths as well. But I have noticed this thing that, you can have monotheism, and then you can have pantheons of gods where there are multiple gods for different maybe phenomena or different aspects of the belief system, as was the case in many ancient religions and many religions even as today. So, but even in those pantheons, there is a concept of a supreme being or a supreme god, a creator god, if you will. So there is that one supreme being, and then that supreme being, in some cases, that being births other gods, or he or she creates other gods, or sometimes there are other gods who kind of take on the form, or they take on avatars and different sort of more increasingly specific forms, as is in the case in Hinduism, of that one creator god. So, I think it's just like a slightly different, trail of belief, you can say, where one person sort of one maybe faith prefers to believe in one god and that's it. And then there is another belief system which they do still believe in that one supreme god that is, above all the others, but they also choose to have other divine beings below them. So, but there is a sort of, intersecting concept there, I think.
So I didn't get the question.
Oh, it wasn't a question. I was just...
Okay. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is like that. That's what you're saying.
As for the other comment that I had, I hope I can just add it in continuation. Okay. So I really enjoyed the talk because this is something that I have also been reflecting on. And I forget the term for this. There is a term in Arabic and one in Urdu as well, if I remember correctly. But there is a term that states that as humans, Islamically, the word used here is humans, we have two sets of duties. So one set of duties is toward God, towards the divine, and that is, all the things that we practice ritually, fasting and namaz and zakat and all of that. We're doing all of that for God. And if we fail to do those duties, as in maybe if we don't pray, maybe if we don't fast, if we drink or something, then we are failing in our duties to God. But there is always the chance that God will forgive us, because we're constantly reminded, as you said, that God is really merciful, and his mercy, as in some hadith they say, it spans an entire ocean. And the other set of duties that we have is the duties toward man. And those are actually given precedence over the duties to God. Because the idea is that you have to be good and kind and merciful to God's other creations, because God will forgive you, they might not. And if they don't forgive you, then you don't earn justice from God. So it is more important to have that criteria fulfilled of being a good person before you become a good Muslim.
The terms is there, hukukul Allah and hukukul ibad.
Yes, exactly.
That if man does not forgive you, then you are in trouble. God might forgive you, but if you don't behave with love towards man and man does not forgive you, you are doomed.
Yes, that was the one I was looking for.
So that takes precedence here. Right. Thanks for sharing.
That's all. Thank you. I really enjoyed the talk.
I'm glad. Any other question?
Please raise your hands if you have questions or comments.
Can we have your presentation, Purefa? Yes, you can have my presentation. I'll email.
Hello.
Pragya or Behzad Bhai.
Hello.
Thank you so much, because there were really some important statements which addressed a lot of my queries with regard to how a Shia or a Sunni would look at the same. If a Shia would be attending your lecture and a Sunni would be attending your lecture, they would trace back to a history where the entire history the narrative of the history would be completely different. So even the terms, for example, I mean, this may sound a little out of context, but then I want to relocate it to the lecture today, is that when we wish Eid Mubarak, and so some people say some Khair Mubarak.
Khair Mubarak, yeah.
Khair Mubarak. And then so Khuda Hafiz, when we say, then a lot of people say that Allah Hafiz. So now, so when I grew up, I used to say, I heard that people say Khuda Hafiz. Then suddenly when, in like last 7, 8, 10 years, I started to hear that a lot of people use Allah Hafiz. And I probably didn't have the right person to ask what exactly is going on. But today I think I met one and I'm listening to one. So it's a good place where I can ask this question, because it will come from probably a little more humanistic, more philosophical.
Yeah. So there is some politics, sectarian politics, and some misunderstandings, or literal people are taking things literally. That's what is really happening. And the way I teach actually generally is no matter if somebody is from another sectarian background, because I take really the common things which not even a Shia or Sunni can debate about. So even this presentation that I gave, there would not be any point where a Shia or a Sunni would say, oh, we don't agree with that. It's really something from which is common, so they can't turn away their face. And as for me, because I teach in this manner, I've been really invited by people from different sects. And the biggest division is Shia Sunni, and I've been, myself being from a Sunni background, I have many times been invited by the Shia community to go and come and talk at their places many times, because I speak in a very common way, not in a sectarian way, I use what is common between Shia Sunni, let's say. Yeah.
Thank you, Reshmi. Akanksha had a question.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for this talk. This brings a lot of the clarity about the things, as I'm not into this religion and the practices. One thing I got confused whether it could be a very minor thing, but as in starting you said, or in your write-up as well, like God is the creator of, or Allah is the creator of everything there is. And then there is that, like Quran says in that, Allah didn't create us so that we might be enemies and hate each other. So who create this enemy? Like there is a concept of Satan, I know. But as you said, Allah is the creator of everything there is. So isn't that included Satan as well in this?
Yeah, Satan is a creature. I said that. Satan is a creature like me, you. I can start preaching enmity and hatred. Satan did that.
So why Allah, that is very loving and merciful and all, why he created thing like that?
Look, Satan, okay, I'll tell you something more about Satan. It's a good question. Look, Satan was not created. Satan was not Satan from the very beginning. Satan was a creature. Like today, God forbid, I'm just giving my own example. I hope never it happens. But today, I might be talking about good things. But tomorrow, you might find me, hey, he's talking about hatred and enmity. What happened to him? So this is what happened to Satan. He was not created for evil. He was a creation. He was a good guy, let's say. But then he turned around. He rebelled. So he became a rebel. Quran says Satan is a rebel against Ar-Rahman. So it means at one point he wasn't. And then he became a rebel against Ar-Rahman, intensely loving, caring, and merciful God.
Thank you for the clarity.
Most welcome.
Kulsum had a comment on the Khuda Hafiz and Allah Hafiz debate. Kulsum, if you'd like to share that with the rest of the group.
Sure. I also used to kind of use them interchangeably until my grandfather pointed it out to me. And he has studied both Urdu and Persian. And he said, you don't really need to say Allah Hafiz. I mean, you can say it if you want. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that Khuda already means God in Persian. So when you say Khuda Hafiz, you are already kind of using the same language. But if you say Allah Hafiz, you're saying Allah, which is Arabic, and Hafiz, which is Persian. So you're just kind of mixing the two languages together. It's not that Allah Hafiz is more correct. It's just, I guess, a newer way of saying it because some people felt that Allah would be more in line with Islam or something. But you can say it either way.
I
It's
think
just a different
maybe you said it the wrong other way around. Hafiz is also an Arabic word. And Khuda is Persian.
Yeah. Khuda is Persian, yes. But then Arabic is also I had this question, but then Arabic has Persian roots. So they all kind of derived from the same sort of proto-language ultimately. So I think...
Let's say there was a more puritanical, thing that, Allah Hafiz is more pure.
That's what people
that kind
think.
Of a thing that started it.
Reshmi has another... Sorry, go.
So Reshmi saying the concept of Satan is equivalent to a kafir. Satan is the first kafir. In the Quran, it comes, when he expressed hatred for the first time, takabbur. Takabbur is like, being proud. And being proud is not that you consider yourself above someone else, but you're also filled with hatred. So the Prophet said, being takabbur is not that you consider yourself to be greater than someone, but that you consider yourself to be greater than someone and hate that person. So that's what Satan did. And on doing that, God called him kafir. So even takabbur, and the Prophet said, the one who has an atom's weight of takabbur will be going to hell. And takabbur he connected with hatred. The takabbur is considering yourself above someone else and hating that person. And Satan, he practiced takabbur for the first time and God called him kafir. So yes, Satan is Satan is the kafir, the first kafir, let's say.
Pragya, can I ask more questions?
Sure. Go ahead. I just wanted to just have a small comment here, which is like even in Ramayana, actually people say that Ravan was a Vidwan. He was very knowledgeable and he was very religious and he was a Shiv Bhakt, but it was because his downfall came from his arrogance. Very similar to, Satan Satan was a worshipper of Allah, believed in one God, but again, he was the first kafir because of the arrogance, because of his thought that, he's superior to others. Reshmi, please continue.
Yeah, so in connection to this whole thought that we are kind of building, I just wanted to bring my internal thought process forward is that, so Swami Vivekananda said that you can only renunciate when you have. You can renunciate what you have. You abandon and you can leave and move forward what you had. So when you were explaining the idea of kafir, that a kafir who is not going to so you were explaining the idea of persecution. So persecution will be, if I've understood it correctly, a kafir is someone who falters after understanding Islam. But if not meeting any persecution, can be befriended can be a friend of another, if I've understood it correctly. So, which essentially means that he's allowed to live. Essentially means that, a kafir can be someone who has renunciated after understanding Islam. What is that? Where do we stand here now? So, if whether he has, I mean, that individual has understood Islam completely and rejected it, or understood Islam completely and absorbed it, and now is practicing Islam in such a manner that he's an embodiment of that whole, idea of God. So renunciation, persecution, and kafir, how would you like to look at it?
Renunciation in what sense? Like, I didn't get it. That, somebody who
No,
understands kafir, I said, somebody who understands it and still
yes,
says no.
yes, exactly. That's so. A renunciator would be someone who. So renunciation in the path of enlightenment, basically.
Mhm.
Okay. So a renunciation from Moh, Maya, all those, greed, all those tattvas, all those energies that control us to behave in a very human form, jealousy, greed. The very second slide that you were explaining, what are those? What is being Satan? So Satan is rage, anger, jealousy, killing people, persecutions, and everything that makes living non-humanistic. So
Mhm.
when we are able to really evolve out of it, and that is where you renunciate material goods, goods of physical and emotional and psychological needs, and then you move and beyond it will be the renunciation and moving beyond. That's what Swami Vivekananda, or the comes from that ideology. So will someone who will renunciate like that, So I don't know if I'm bringing
Okay.
two thoughts together, but if we would like to look at it like this, then
Look,
will a renunciator be called a kafir?
a renunciator of what? Literally speaking, yes, a renunciator would be a kafir. In Quran, Muslims are called kafir, for example. Many people don't know this. That, in one verse, Quran says that Muslims are a kafir to taghut. Taghut is like a false deity, an oppressor. So a Muslim is a kafir to a taghut. So the word kafir has also been used for a Muslim in a way to renunciate. But okay, there is a simple renunciator, and then there's a term, a theological term. So one is a literal meaning, and then another is, a theological understanding of that term in a certain way. So in a general way, yes, anybody who renunciates is a kafir. Good or bad is a different thing. Huh?
Are there any more questions?
Thank you.
Can I ask something more?
Yes.
Yeah. As you like several times this come to master and servant. What is the word in like the original word in Quran for that?
For master is Rab.
Okay.
Rab is again a word that has come into Punjabi also. Rabba, the Punjabi's language has it. And servant is Abd. Abd is like a servant. Yeah.
Okay.
Abd. Like Abdullah, Abdur Rahman. So Abd, Abdu, or Abd.
Okay.
Abdu
Because
means
this servant and master concepts, the bring into non-humanistic form again. So the real words are very.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Since it's time, we would like to, Basit Bhai, I would like to thank you. Sorry, am I audible? Okay.
Yeah, you are.
So Basit Bhai, thank you so much for such lovely values. I think the stuff that you teach is transcends religious boundaries. So everything you teach has a moral value, has something that we all, irrespective of which community, country, religion we belong to. And I would really like to thank you on behalf of InDialogue for being part of our dialogue studies program, and year and year after. And thank you so much. Just an admin announcement. I have emailed the reflection forms to everybody, and the deadline is on 4th of November at 6 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So with that, we come to the end of the session.
Pragya, can I just
Sure.
tell people that if somebody is interested in knowing more, then we have this channel called Remembering Allah. Put it in the chat. And if somebody is interested in listening to the narrative of Islam in this way, then you can visit my YouTube channel called Remembering Allah, and you might find more such understanding of these things which we've talked. And there's already a series on Kafir. So there's a series. If you go, there'll be a playlist, and on the word Kafir, there are some 10 videos on just the word Kafir. So if somebody's interested, can go there and watch such videos. Thank you.
I'll share the channel with everybody on the WhatsApp group as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, In Dialogue. Thank you, Pragya. Sorry.